Hello, everyone. Welcome to my podcast. I'm Becky, and I can be found as Becky Burns Gibson on Instagram and Ravelry. Today, I'm wearing the McCall's 7092. It is a Palmer plush pattern, and I absolutely love this pattern. It was wonderful to make. But I did make it out of a scuba print that I bought at Joann's Fabrics. I love the scuba fabric, but it wasn't the right choice for this pattern because the layers that form through here were just too thick, and it was really hard on my machine. So in the future, I'll make that out of a lighter weight jersey. So today I would like to share with you my library of crafting books. Sort of talk about each book. I have some knitting reference books, some knitting pattern books. I have some magazines and some sewing books and some spinning books. So let's begin. I'm going to start with my favorite book in my library, the Vogue Knitting book. If you were to have one knitting book in your library, I would recommend it be Vogue Knitting. My oldest son purchased this for me as a Christmas present, and I love it. It has everything all the way from basic techniques through cabling, color knitting, and lace. And it goes all the way through to designing sweaters and shawls. So you can use this book as a beginner to learn beginner techniques, or you can use it to learn advanced techniques. You can really grow with this book. Here you can see that they have really good illustrations of the basic knitting technique. My favorite part of the book is the one on correcting errors. Another useful section is the section on the Kitchener stitch, because those are to be used to as one way to finish off the toe of a sock, and I always forget how to do it. There are formulas for making a yoke, calculating the different measurements. There's a section that's got standard hat measurements. And sock measurements. These sock measurements come in handy when you're making a sock for someone else. Again, my favorite knitting book. Number 2 of my favorite knitting reference books, The Knitter's Companion. This is a small little book. Doesn't take up much room on your bookshelf, that's for sure. So there's all sorts of techniques included in this book. There's a formula for interchanging yarns and yarn estimates for sweaters that are in standard yarn weights. There's a section on sweater ease allowances. And my favorite part, in the back, there's a knitting needle gauge and there's a knitting gauge down here at the bottom. And there is the reason this is my second favorite book is because there is a DVD included. And you can play this DVD and you can skip forward to different sections on the DVD, and they have videos showing you how to do the different techniques. And that has really come in useful for me. So second favorite mainly because of the DVD that's included. The next book that I like is 750 Knitting Stitches. I think I got this book from Chris, what is that bookstore in Spring Hill? Books A Million. Yes, I think I got this from Books A Million. So it can be very useful for beginners, as there's a section for starting off that has basic techniques. Then it moves to more advanced techniques. And then there's a section on how to read charts. There's a key to stitch diagrams. And then there are just loads and loads of different edgings, different lace work, color work, cables. You can really use this book to design your own knitted garment. The next book that I enjoy is The Knitter's Handy Book of Top-Down Sweaters. So this is not a reference book, this is a pattern book. And included are patterns that, the way they have the patterns written, you can make these sweaters in any size. And they show the pattern for every size. And it's in tables. So your knitting instructions are typed out, and then you're supposed to refer to those tables for your stitch counts. This sweater is in my future, the Brooch Basic sweater. But there are more, I guess, intricate patterns. This one's in my future. It's called Zigs and Zags, this colorwork sweater. And like I said, the exciting thing about this book is that you can make these sweaters in any size. There is also in the back, a section on techniques. So if you want to knit sweaters, this is one of the best books. Okay, next, more pattern books. Here are some baby books, baby patterns. Vintage knit for babies. You know, I have a granddaughter, and I purchased these books when my daughter-in-law was expecting my granddaughter. And I made several items for her and still have several items planned for her. Vintage Knit for Babies has beautiful, very, it looks like something we've dressed our babies in 20 or 30 years ago because they're just beautiful. Daisy Long christening dress set. There is a christening dress in this book. And this one I think would be great for a little boy or a little girl. And I think that this sweater is in my future. And there are many, many more beautiful patterns in this book. Look at this bolero. Look at that, made out of mohair. Vintage Knit for Babies. I highly recommend it if you've got a little one. Okay, next we've got knitting gifts for babies. There are lots of different garments, baby booties, blankets, toys, hats. This is a sweater, this Jiffy jacket. This is a sweater that I made for my granddaughter. I made it in the newborn size, and I did use the recommended yarn. Cascade Eco Cloud. Okay, if I ever have another little one to knit for, my granddaughter's already too big for this cape, but if I ever have another baby to knit for, I think this would be a nice, easy cape to slip on and off of a child. And it looks really cozy. It's a cabled cape. So that is in my future. The next baby knitting book is Easy Baby Knits. And it's just what the book says, you know, easy. They're easy to knit. Here's a hat that I made for my granddaughter. And then this double-breasted knit coat is in my future for her. See, it goes up to a size 36 month. Okay, next, knitting pattern books. There's Elizabeth Zimmerman's Knitter's Almanac. And it's a little different from some of the other knitting pattern books because there's stories around each of these patterns that are in this book. So it's a nice book for reading as well as a place to get patterns. On the back it says projects for each month of the year. And I ordered this book from the Woolery. This is the only book I have that has a color work mitten. It's called a Norwegian mitten. It's got a chart and the pattern for those. And then this is the pie shawl. This is the pie shawl that I plan to make out of the Rooster's Delightful Lace yarn that I have. It's green. I think that will make a beautiful, beautiful shawl. It's in the shape of a circle. The very first knitting pattern book that I ever purchased, I purchased it at the House of Yarn in Nashville, and it's the sock yarn shawls 2. There was a sock yarn shawls 1. I don't have that one. I have the sock yarn shawls 2. There are beautiful shawls in this book. There are small shawls, mid-sized shawls, and large shawls. I have started knitting the Cinder shawl, and it knitted up wonderfully, but I chose the wrong yarn to knit with, so I ended up frogging it. But it is a wonderful pattern for a nice basic shawl. There are a couple of shawls in here that I think are beautiful because of the color combinations that they put together. The Earth and Sky shawl right here, it's blue and brown. There's another picture of it. That shawl is in my future, as well as this shawl. It's called Flow. This green and brown is really pretty together. And I plan to make them just like they are. I don't plan to substitute yarns or anything for those, because I think the yarns used in the illustrations are just beautiful. One of the larger shawls that's in my future is the Demeter shawl. I just think this makes a wonderfully beautiful shawl I can see wearing. I can see myself wearing this shawl. Next book is Windward by Knit Picks. And obviously I ordered it from Knit Picks. It has beautiful, beautiful cabled patterns inside. One of the beautiful patterns is the Copen hat. And see, they've used a heathered yarn for that. And it just really brings out the cable stitches. So I started making this hat. And I knitted it according to the instructions for the brim. And then when I started knitting the actual cap part, the cabling was too hard. It was just too hard to do. So I'm finishing this cap up in stockinette stitch. But I regret that I'm not able to work my cable needles well enough to produce this hat as it appears in the picture. Here's another book. It's called Heritage. It's by Knit Picks. And it's got all men's knitwear in this book. So I'm interested in that for my husband and my sons. Here's one pattern called Handsome Fella. And I like this narrow scarf. And I would like to make this in a quivet yarn. I think it would be just outstanding. That's in my future. And I have made the Winding Road hat. And it is a wonderful pattern. It just knits up beautifully. And I did use a cashmere blend for the hat, as was recommended in the pattern. And this hat has some cabling on the side that you really can't see in the picture. Next we have Wood Smoke Cable Collection, and this is also by Knit Picks. This has beautiful cabled garments. One that's in my feature is the Bridget cardigan. Knit Picks sells a kit for the Bridget cardigan, and purchasing that is in my future. Gives you all of the yarn that you need to make your size of the Bridget cardigan, and they have dark gray and light gray to choose from. Also in my immediate feature is the Cadalton hat. I have some really beautiful yellow alpaca yarn that I'm going to make this cabled hat out of. And I want to make it for my mom. Here's the Morning Ramble cardigan. There's not a kit for this one, but I wish there were. I think this looks like just a wonderful cardigan to put on a chilly morning. The next book I have is Seamless or Nearly Seamless Knits. I bought this early on when I was beginning knitting because I was a little intimidated at the thought of knitting and shaping and seaming sweaters. And there are some simple sweaters in here that a beginner could be successful at. This sweater is a cabled vest, and it's in my future. I have already purchased the yarn needed to make this vest. Also in my future, the April sweater. I have purchased the yarn needed to make this sweater. I think the button is an interesting detail. I'm going to have to go button shopping and get a really nice one. Lastly, I think this Perry vest is really good beginner's knit. You use bigger needles, and it's just a simple knit. Next, I have a book that my wonderful son bought me at a yard sale, and it's called Knit Socks. And there are patterns in here for socks that are, well, there's a basic starter stockinette sock, and there are various sock patterns in both worsted weight and fingering weight yarn. This is an interesting one. It's called Shadow Box because you hold a fingering weight yarn with a mohair yarn to make this beautiful halo looking sock. No, you hold a worsted weight with a mohair. You don't hold a fingering weight with a mohair. You hold a worsted weight with a mohair. This classy slip-up sock I marked because I think it would be a great sock for a beginner to work on. You know, to kind of get you out of just doing your basic vanilla stockinette stitch sock. And here is the most exciting sock in this book. It's called Winter Garden. It's a colorwork sock. Look at that. I've seen that sock on Pinterest before. I have a small book that I purchased at Hobby Lobby. It's called Celebrity Slouchy Beanies. And I don't really like this book very much because most of the patterns are in worsted weight or DK weight yarn. And I just have a lot of fingering weight yarn. So the only one that excites me is called Cabled Classic. And it's this one. I think that one is beautiful. Also at Hobby Lobby, I purchased I Love Knitting Caps and Hats. And there are just basic hats in here. None of them are really very exciting. And most of them are worsted weight patterns. And I don't have a lot of worsted weight in my stash. Okay, next we have some crochet books. Here we have Celtic Cable Crochet. There are some beautiful cable crochet patterns in this book. I find crocheting cables to be a little fiddly. I'm not really good at it, but I hope to improve in the future. Here is the Fergus Shrug. Let's see if I can find a better picture of it. Yeah, here's a picture of the back of it. That is in my future. Here is a cap called Braids and Weaves Alpaca Hat. There's a picture of that. I have started this hat and frogged it because I used to have more problems with my vision before I got my transition lenses, and I really couldn't see those stitches well enough to crochet the cables. But I still have the yarn that I was going to use for this hat, and I'd like to pick that project up again. Also in my future is the Orlaith robe sweater. This, like the earlier sweater that I showed you, looks like it would be a great sweater to put on a chilly morning. It just looks comfortable, and I like the big buttons on it. Next we have Poetic Crochet. I love this book. Every one of these shawls are beautiful, and I'd love to make all of them. Some of them are so fine that I think that they would look good if you added beads or sequins when you're knitting or crocheting, because this is a crochet pattern book. Here we have Spring Dreams. And I have a better picture of that, I believe. Yes, here's the back of the sweater. I mean the shawl. Look at how fine weight of yarn is used. Fine lace weight yarn. I can't wait to make this one. And as I said, I'd like to add beads to it. Okay, so we're moving on now to magazines. So I have the Pom Pom Quarterly magazine, Winter 2020. This is what it looks like on the front. There are wonderful patterns in here. My favorite pattern, I don't dare try to pronounce because I would embarrass myself, but the pattern is by Hiroko Payne. And there's two versions of the pattern there. And my favorite is this one, which is also on the back cover of the book. That's my favorite. I would love to make that sweater. And here it is on the back of the book. Pom Pom Quarterly is a good magazine. I'll be purchasing more of those in the future. Also a good magazine is Interweave Knits. Interweave Knits is just packed full of really great patterns. And my copy is Winter 2021. So I'm really excited about Adeline's cardigan. The shaping on this is beautiful as well as the cables. Look at those cuffs. Also the Sublime mitts. Make that out of some really soft yarn. That would be just beautiful. Certainly a dressy fingerless mitt. Okay, now we're going to move to spinning books. I have a couple of episodes of Spin-Off Magazine, and I do enjoy these. Of spinning books, I have the Intentional Spinner, and it includes an instructional DVD, which I enjoy. So it includes everything about the nature of fibers, cellulose, protein, and manufactured. And then it has different spinning techniques, different drafting methods, plying methods. And also there are 4 intermediate spinning projects included. So as I said, the drafting methods, different drafting methods, and there are color illustrations of yarn preparation and spinning. So woolen as well as worsted preparation and spinning. Nice colored illustrations. And then there's a section on plying. And then there are, as I said, there are 4 intermediate spinning projects, and one of them is socks, and that's exciting. Now this book may not seem like a craft book because it's a homesteading book. It's called Back to Basics, and I purchased this at Books A Million. And it has some really interesting sections like on candle making and soap making that are of interest to me. And then there is also a section on natural dyes. There's a section on natural dyes. Look at that. There's a section on spinning and fiber preparation. And there is a section on weaving. And like I said, there's great color illustrations. I would recommend this as a reference book for homesteading. It doesn't explain everything in detail. It sort of gives a summary explanation for everything. But it's not a real good how-to book in detail, but it's a good reference book for summaries of how-tos on a homestead. And like I said, there are several crafting sections that interest me. So now moving on to sewing books. Let's see. I purchased So Charming Scrappy Quilts from 5-inch squares. So I love to buy charm packs with that include 5-inch squares. And I wanted this book because I wanted ideas of what to make, of what I could make. And the quilt on the front here it is in the book, Vintage Hourglass and 4-patch. This was an inspiration for me to make a quilt for my niece, which I did, and she loves it. Okay, my wonderful son, he bought me this book for Christmas a few years ago, and it's Sewing for Dummies, and he covered over dummies and made it say Sewing for Amazing Moms. This is a good how-to book. It looks like all the other dummies books. There are techniques, illustrations. They're not color illustrations, they're black and white illustrations. There's an interesting section on hand stitching where it explains how to do different hand stitches, which I appreciate. There's a section on putting in a centered zipper, which I have used. And probably my most favorite part of the book, 10 rookie sewing mistakes to avoid. And 10 important sewing fundamentals. So if you just started sewing and you want to look up something quick that explains something in a basic detail, this is a good book for you. Next we have the sewing book. And I purchased this at Books A Million. No, I didn't purchase this. My son gave it to me for Christmas, my wonderful son. And it is a very detailed sewing book that can really grow with you. There are many sewing techniques, both basic and advanced. There's a section that's just about sewing equipment. There's a section on fabrics. there's a really good section on how to read patterns. This is good for a beginner. That's something I struggled with as a beginner, how to read patterns. And of interest to me now is altering patterns. There's an interesting section on collars. And pockets. And of particular interest to me is the section on welt pockets, which I have used. The section on a concealed or invisible zipper and zipper placket. There's even a section on tailoring of how to interface a tailored jacket. There is a section that has patterns, and here's the instructions on how to use patterns. And there's many patterns in the back. Some you have to blow up on a copy machine, but there are patterns included in the book. If I were going to recommend one book for someone that's beginning sewing, it would be this book called The Sewing Book by Allison Smith. Lastly, I have the Quilting Bible. It's the 3rd edition of the Quilting Bible, the complete photo guide to machine quilting. There are wonderful color illustrations in this book. There's quilt basics, block pieced quilts, sampler quilts, alternate piecing methods, embellished quilts. There's a good section on how to store quilts. Here is an interesting section for me, which is how to make quilts that have houses on them. One of the first quilts I made was a quilt that had houses on them. I made it for my father, and I didn't have a pattern. I just made up a pattern, and it worked well. But here we have the benefit of having a pattern. Here's another picture of the quilt on a bed. And also of interest to me recently is the Ohio Star design. They also have a picture of a quilt in this book that uses the Ohio Star, and there are photos in the middle square of the quilt piece. There are family photos in each one of those squares. Well, that is all for my book review today. Thank you for joining me. If you like what you see, click the like button. If you want to see more, subscribe. And please share the video. And until next time, bye-bye.